So the nominations for the 42nd annual Golden Joystick Awards have been announced, and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth as well as Astro Bot lead the way with 5 nominations each. So we're going to take a look at the nominations in today's video. So if any of that sounds cool to you, or if you just like what you hear, you can subscribe, leave a comment down below, and like the video. All of that helps out so much, and it's greatly appreciated. So some of you are probably wondering, what the heck are these Golden Joystick Awards? Do they actually matter? Yeah, kinda. So from my understanding, these awards have been around for almost 40 years, or a little over 40 years actually, and it originated in the UK primarily for PC gaming. Over time, they started to include console games, and it kind of snowballed into something much bigger. So pretty much this time every year, the nominations will come out. And what really makes the Golden Joystick Awards unique is that from my understanding, it is fan voted. So it's not like the Game Awards where you got these judges that come together, they nominate things, and then there's a specific voting body that decides, what game wins each category. The Game Awards are more akin to like the Academy Awards, where there's like this voting body of industry professionals that decide everything. So that is kind of good for some people. Some people don't really care for that, but that's kind of what sets the Golden Joystick Awards apart from the Game Awards, is that it is primarily fan voted. So you can go online, look at the nominations, and vote for these yourselves. So that also includes, the people that make these games, the people that buy these games, the people that, support them. A lot of the fans get to decide, what wins these games. So it is pretty cool. There's been some notable winners over the years. Last year, Baldur's Gate 3 won Game of the Year. A few years ago, I believe RE2 Remake won an award. I just can't remember which one it is as of right now. But it is still fun to, take a look at this stuff, especially because this is almost kind of like a precursor to Jeff Keighley's Game Awards. So some of the stuff you see get nominated here at the Golden Joystick does kind of become a bit of a precursor to what we'll see at Jeff's event. And just a heads up, for some of these awards, we're going to go way more in depth when the Game Awards actually happen. I believe those nominations usually hit in early November. That to a lot of people is kind of like the end all be all for Game Awards. So we're going to get way more in depth with whatever nominations end up showing up there for Rebirth. So starting off with the first nomination for Rebirth, it is Console Game of the Year. And for this category, we're going to take a look at all of the games nominated, unlike the other nominations we're going to take a look at. But obviously Rebirth is there. That's got my vote. We've also got Dragon's Dogma 2, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, the latest Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom, Astro Bot, which I have played and it is phenomenal, and Helldivers 2. So obviously I'm voting for Rebirth here. I do primarily cover Final Fantasy, but Rebirth again is just a game that it came out in February. I'm still thinking about it now in October. I'm still planning my second playthrough. I'm just waiting a little bit so I don't burn myself out. But everything you could potentially want in a really great action adventure game or action RPG, Rebirth, in my opinion, ticks off all of those boxes. And I don't think I had a single moment in that game where I'm like, I don't want to be playing this anymore. I was always having fun. I think the only part of Rebirth that really was kind of like, oh, I'm not a big fan of this, is the Kate Sith box throwing stuff. It was cute at first, and I do love the music in that section. It's like this really fun, spooky, kind of whimsical version of Kate Sith's theme. And throwing boxes for a room or two is fine, but then more boxes kept showing up, and more boxes kept showing up, and the mechanics to shoot the box was just a little more confusing than it needed to be. But again, like, this game is like a triumph, and I've seen so many people say Rebirth doesn't feel like a Square Enix game, it feels like a Squaresoft game. And I think that is a pretty appropriate description of what Rebirth is. It just has everything I want personally in a video game. Fantastic gameplay, incredible graphics, great art direction, a soundtrack, which we will get to in a bit. It's impeccable. Now, I do want to also give a massive honorable mention to Astro Bot. I did play that game. I finished it from beginning to end. I 100%ed that game. I got every single robot, and that game is such a breath of fresh air. And some people will look at Astro Bot and go, well, I don't really see what's so special about that game. It's one of those games where you really got to play it. And the thing I'll say is that a lot of times we get really awesome platformers, 3D platformers in particular, and they usually come from Nintendo. It is very rare that a studio that isn't Nintendo can put together a Nintendo quality platformer like Astro Bot and Team Asobe. They just knocked it out of the park. Astro controls like a dream. All of the levels are really fun and dynamic. Each gimmick you get for Astro in each different level is fun to use, and it never got boring. I think like my favorite one may have been like the slow down time mechanic, where you have to get past certain obstacles where there's like really fast flying objects and you have to time your button press properly to slow things down to create space to move through or to create platforms to jump on. It's just a really super fun, charming game. It's a love letter not just to PlayStation games and the games that helped build that brand, but it really is just a love letter to gaming in general. All of the different bots you come across and you can rescue was always fun. It's got great music. Again, it's such an incredibly fun controlling game. It controls like a dream. So if you're someone out there who likes 3D platformers and maybe you kind of passed on Astro Bot, I would highly recommend you check that game out. It is so much fun. It's definitely my personal runner-up for Game of the Year, right behind Rebirth. It is just astonishing that a new developer like this can come along and create a 3D platformer that is, you know, up there with the Marios. It's with the best of the best. And also, quick mention, there are a lot of cameos within Astro Bot from different franchises and different companies like Capcom. Unfortunately, no Square Enix cameos in Astro Bot. There's no Cloud, there's no Sephiroth, no Tifa, no Vincent. None of these characters make an appearance, unfortunately, which is kind of odd because if you look at Astro's Playroom, which was the tech demo for the PS5, Cloud's Buster Sword is in that game, and it's the original Buster Sword. It's not the remake Buster Sword. It's the OG one that has that much simpler design to it. So unfortunately, something happened behind the scenes. Team Asobe even talked about this. They couldn't really get into detail, but unfortunately Square Enix passed on cameos for Astro Bot. I think a lot of it has to do with Square just being super protective of their IPs, and maybe they don't want a, you know, robot version of Sephiroth being dangled from some drone in the sky screaming for help, which happens a lot in that game. And I also do know that Square Enix charges quite a lot for people to license their characters, and it's one of the reasons why the latest Smash, when that came out, some people thought Cloud wasn't going to come back, but thankfully Cloud did. Sephiroth was also added, so it's unfortunate, but if they do a follow-up to Astro Bot, maybe Square Enix will, you know, change their tune and see how successful and how good the game actually is, and then they can put people in there like Cloud, Sephiroth, Vincent, Tifa, Aerith, what have you. So Rebirth gets my vote. Close runner-up, Astro Bot. Really fun, charming game. I highly recommend you check it out. Now, with that out of the way, let's take a look at the rest of the nominations Rebirth has, starting with Best Storytelling. Now, this one's going to be kind of controversial for some people. I've already seen some takes online where people are like, you know, well, does this really count as Best Storytelling because it's a remake? To that, I would say, yeah, you're right, but also, you know, while it does follow the original story, there is still plenty of new things in this game in terms of new characters, different locations you're visiting. Some scenario stuff doesn't play out quite like the original game, but I would still say, yeah, this definitely should count as Best Storytelling. Again, I very much like the game. One of the criticisms I had of Rebirth, this was also a criticism of Remake, is that they tend to wait until the last portion of the game to really give you a ton of story stuff, and then you kind of marinate on that as a player. I personally hope that Part 3 has a lot more of the story stuff sprinkled throughout the game, and I think it will because so much stuff happens in that last section of the original FF7, so I think Part 3 in terms of storytelling will be a much more even thing, but I would still vote for Rebirth on this. I loved everything about this game's story. I enjoyed the pacing. I didn't get bored at any point in time. I know the ending, again, is very controversial, but for me, the more I started to read into it and check out theories, I'm like, ooh, this is pretty exciting, and it's also pretty dark. So storytelling, I would give to Rebirth as well. Next is Best Soundtrack. Another nomination for Best Soundtrack is Astro Bot. That game does have a phenomenal soundtrack as well. And that's the thing I love about Astro Bot is that, you know, every stage is themed. You've got like a spooky stage, you've got like a family-friendly island stage, there's like pirate stages, and all of the music matches those levels perfectly. I forget the name of the song in particular, but there's like a tree level that has like this funky tree, and the music that plays in the background is just so fun and jolly. Kind of reminds me of something that would have been on like Michael Jackson's Off the Wall album. It's just such a really fun soundtrack. They do reuse some songs from Astro's Playroom, but you know, that still had a decent soundtrack as well. But again, this one to me, hands down, Rebirth. 400 plus tracks. I don't think there's a bad track in the bunch for Rebirth. Just from top to bottom, that soundtrack is impeccable. The amount of work that they put into it as well, crafting songs they didn't even need to craft. You know, some of these songs only show up for specific side quests that some players will never actually do. Up next, I think this one is very well deserved. Best lead performer, Cody Christian as Cloud. Cody knocks it out of the goddamn park with his performance as Cloud, and he has to do so much more in this game than he did in Remake. You know, being current day Cloud, but also having to create this version of Cloud that is, you know, spoiler alert for those who, you know, didn't play the OG game, but creating a version of Cloud that not only is younger, but is mimicking Zack. And I thought Cody knocked it out of the park with that portrayal. The way he changes his voice, the way he changes his cadence and delivers those lines. It's just impeccable the way he handles all of that. And again, a lot of this is also coming down to the writing and the voice direction. They've got a really great team of people over at Square Enix, and their voice direction has come such a long way from, you know, Advent Children or Final Fantasy X even. And the performances they're able to get out of these characters is just... it's impressive. And looking at behind the scenes stuff with Cody, he clearly not only loves the character, but he really understands who Cloud is at his core. And one of his favorite descriptions of Cloud is one that I agree with is, you know, deep down, Cloud is essentially just this big old goofball. He wants so badly for people to think that he's cool, and he does all of these cool things, and he doesn't realize he needs to show off. You know, he doesn't need to do any of that stuff. People already like and respect him, but the journey that Cloud goes on in Rebirth of breaking down, and, you know, there's what happens with Aerith. And from my understanding, we did cover this a while back, Cody did record the lines for the scene where, spoiler alert, Aerith dies. We just, again, don't hear any of that. And I'll leave a link in this video to the article we covered from Cody Christian where he talks about preparing for that specific scene and how all of that dialogue has already been recorded. So we're not going to hear any of that, unfortunately, until part 3, but I know Cody's going to knock it out of the park. He just gives a phenomenal performance as Cloud. The aloofness, the seriousness, the edgelordness that Cloud sometimes has, allowing the real Cloud to kind of peek through at times. He's phenomenal. Now, before we get to supporting actor, I do want to say I am a little surprised that John Eric Bentley was not nominated in any of these categories for performance. I think he might have, other than Cody, the best performance in Rebirth. And the character of Barrett goes through so much in that game, and John's performance is just phenomenal. And the two scenes that, you know, stick out to me are, you know, the death of Dine, which John has said that he used the real life experience of his father passing away to get through that scene. But then he also has to do a very similar scene where, you know, Barrett's wife is dying in his arms and he has to relive all of that stuff again. So those are two incredibly impactful scenes that John, I think, just knocks out of the park. So I am kind of surprised that he was not nominated for a performance award. So hopefully at the Game Awards, which I think is a little bit more expansive with their categories and who they nominate, I think the Game Awards will be Cody and John nominated for their performances. That's what I personally would really like to see. I think John should get his flowers. So I'm a little shocked that he was not nominated at the Golden Joystick Awards. And it is worth noting that last year's Golden Joystick Awards, Ben Starr won for Best Performance for his role as Clive, which I think was well deserved. And he was one of the reasons why I think Clive worked as a character. It's just that Ben put so much effort into that role to bring Clive to life, and you know, he's such a big part of why Clive works, so that was greatly deserved. And the last is Best Supporting Performer. This one goes to Briana White, who voices Aerith, and I do think she does a fantastic job as well. Again, it's almost kind of like a Cody Christian Cloud situation where Briana is playing different versions of Aerith at any given time. We don't always know which version of Aerith we are speaking to or seeing in a cutscene, but the changes in Briana's performance are very subtle, but if you really pay attention, you can notice like, oh, okay, I think the Aerith that we're speaking to, this is the, you know, live stream Omni Aerith. or this is the Aerith from, you know, present day. And there's just subtle changes in her voice and in her line delivery when she's playing those different roles. And again, she also has a lot to do in this game. She does get some of the exposition. There's that really wonderful scene in Cosmo Canyon where she's just kind of coming clean to everyone and explaining that she is like the last living ancient and what that means to her and all of the pressure she's feeling. There's the Temple of the Ancients sequence where she's, you know, basically giving the party a pep talk, so to speak, on life and death and how they're two sides of the same coin, which is another wonderful scene. And then I think one of the standouts for her is her basically saying goodbye to Cloud, the final moments they get to spend together in that alternate world where she's acting like nothing is wrong, but you can tell in her voice something is coming. She needs to figure this out, but she also needs to find a way to say goodbye to Cloud. So throughout that entire segment and that date, Cloud knows something is weird, but he's just kind of going along with it. And then they get into the church and then she just kind of, you know, reveals all to him, so to speak. And she, you know, pushes him through that portal and we see Sephiroth walk into the church Terminator style and we know what's going to happen. So I think, again, she does a phenomenal job. Another shout out I would give here is Britt Baron. I think she does a wonderful job as Tifa. And I'm assuming that everyone outside of Cloud would be considered supporting, just based on the way the Golden Joystick has these nominations laid out. So Britt also gets a big shout out from me. I'll go more in depth with Britt when we talk about the Game Award nominations, because I do want to first see what happens there. How many noms does Rebirth get? Which categories is it nominated in? There's so much more I want to say, so I'm kind of saving myself for the Game Awards discussion, which should happen probably about a month from now. But with that being said, it's really fun to take a look at these awards and just kind of see where the industry is headed, what nominations each game got. And again, because this is fan voted, we can vote on it. So I'll leave a link in the description below for you guys to check out the website, check out all of the categories, and you guys can vote on the games that you think should win these awards. With that being said, that is the video. I am Curious Corduroy. Let me know in the comments down below, what do you guys think so far of the Golden Joystick Awards and Rebirth's nominations? And more specifically, I'm looking forward to Jeff Keighley's event. And my question to you guys is, who do you think out of Rebirth will get nominated for Best Performance? Because I think there's a good chance that Cody and John will both be nominated. So I think two people at least from Rebirth will get nominated for Best Performance, hopefully at the Game Awards. With that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.